Alright guys, so it looks like we're starting to see some cracks develop between Israel and its closest allies and backers around the world that remain, as we're heading towards now almost 2 years of a genocide, and Israel looks to be setting up their final solution of total ethnic cleansing for the entire population of Gaza. Now, we're going to get to some of the actions that these major European countries are taking here in just a second amidst this mass starvation campaign in Gaza and a significant ramping up of the ethnic cleansing in the West Bank. But just to start us off here, in terms of how Israel is handling this situation and handling their relationships with these countries, we have this absolutely wild, unhinged situation that just went down in Jenin in the occupied West Bank. So here's the headline from The Guardian. They say, Israeli troops fire warning shots at 25 diplomats who were visiting the occupied West Bank. So some details on this. They say, again, Israeli troops have fired warning shots at a group of 25 diplomats who were visiting Jenin in the occupied West Bank on an official mission that was organized by the Palestinian Authority to observe the humanitarian situation there. The Israeli military said that the visit had been approved, but the delegation, quote, deviated from the approved route, and Israeli soldiers fired warning shots to distance them from the area. So footage shows a number of diplomats giving media interviews when a rapid series of shots rang out nearby, forcing them to run for cover. The delegation comprised ambassadors and diplomats representing 31 countries, including Italy, Canada, Egypt, Jordan, and the UK. And of course, they say as background here that Jenin has been the focus of a major Israeli assault back in January that's continued on to today that has forced tens of thousands of Palestinians from their homes in one of the largest West Bank displacements in years. And I'll show you some more details on all of that here from Dropside in a second, but finishing off on this article, and then we'll look at the videos, they say the British, French, and other European ministers summoned the Israeli ambassadors in their respective capitals to explain the unacceptable incident, which will fuel already growing international anger and concern as Israel continues its offensive in Gaza and ramps up the expansion of settlements in the West Bank that are illegal under international law. So let's go ahead and watch some of these videos here where apparently they deviated from the path that Israel had laid out for them, and how exactly they responded to this. So you can clearly see the IDF soldiers posted up there in the background shooting. I mean, it almost looks like they're pointing directly at them. They're calling these warning shots, I guess. But we have another angle here where this guy is giving an interview, and you can hear the shots again ring out right behind him.
جيش الاحتلال يطلق النار على وفد الاحتلال. تواجدنا يطلق النار بشكل مباشر هي جيش الاحتلال لا زال.
So you can see a little bit there, and then also the panic that happens afterwards here as everybody starts running back to their vehicles. Now, in response to this, Israel has come out and said after shooting at diplomats from nearly 24 countries, the Israeli military says it, quote, regrets the inconvenience that it caused. Now, let's just pause and think about this for a second. What does this say about the sort of like baked in violence that Israeli soldiers think is acceptable? Right? I'm struggling to think of even some of the most insane and far-right and fascist and violent societies around the world where a country would have a group of ambassadors or diplomats from countries that are their allies, presumably, and that they would have their soldiers fire quote-unquote warning shots at them for deviating slightly from the predetermined path that they laid out for them. I mean, what kind of fucking country does this? Again, to your own allies and backers, as some of those allies are starting to get a little bit wary of their support for you. Do you not think there's any other potential reasonable course of action that you could take if you don't want them to go to one specific area, or if you think they're getting themselves into a dangerous place, or what you don't want them to see something in that area? I don't know, maybe you could have somebody talk to them. You could have a soldier even approach them and describe to them what's going on. No, we just have to fire bullets at them, live ammunition in their direction, causing a massive panic. Guys, these are European diplomats, largely at least. So if this is how they treat the diplomats and the ambassadors from countries that are supposed allies of theirs, how do you think that they're treating Palestinians in the West Bank, right? This is a total and complete apartheid state that we're looking at, where an immense amount of violence on a daily basis is directed towards Palestinians. It's a slow-rolling ethnic cleansing that's been going on for years, if not decades, at this point, and it's significantly been ramping up over the last number of years, and more specifically over the last number of months. So this is an untenable situation, to be clear, and I mean that as a society for Israel. You cannot engage in this kind of behavior, not just towards Palestinians, but also towards, diplomats and other journalists that come to this region as well, and then expect that you are not going to become an international pariah state, which is what we should consider Israel to be at this point. Again, we're talking about a slow-rolling ethnic cleansing in the West Bank that's happening in broad daylight, people being expelled by the tens of thousands from their homes, the demolition of entire communities, people killed on a daily basis, and then in Gaza, we're talking about a full-blown genocide. On top of the fact that beyond that, Israel's also bombing all of its other surrounding neighbor countries, in Lebanon, in Syria, threatening to annex huge portions of Syria. Like, these are not the actions of a reasonable, stable society or country. This is what a rogue state looks like. This is what a pariah state looks like. And they're doing this to themselves. They're doing it to themselves when they do this kind of shit. Now, what's going to be the response specifically from any of these countries to this specific incident? I guess we'll have to wait and see. But from Israel's perspective, they're just like, oh, it was an inconvenience. An inconvenience? You just fired at a bunch of diplomats from countries around the world who were here to specifically look into the humanitarian crisis that you're creating for the Palestinians that you are subjecting to an apartheid and an ongoing ethnic cleansing. All right, guys. Now, again, in terms of the specifics of what's been going on in specifically in Jenin, the place where they were. So here from Dropsite News on some of that background, they say state of siege. This is from March of this year, by the way. Israel is conducting its largest mass expulsion campaign in the West Bank since 1967. And you can see a burned Palestinian home in Jenin that was taken this February 26th of this year. So a little bit of details here. In Nablus and Jenin, the occupied West Bank, Israeli military forces killed 34-year-old Tariq Qassas with a bullet to the chest on February 25th while he was on his way home from work at a bakery 2 kilometers away in the old city of Nablus. So Qassas, a father to a 5-year-old and another child on the way, was the 11th Palestinian to be killed in Nablus, a bustling city in the north of the occupied West Bank, just since January. They say here, quote, "My brother called me while at work and told me to be careful when heading home to make sure that the army is gone." They told Dropsite News the Israeli army had been conducting an operation near the Western Cemetery in the city, and in the end, it was him that was killed while heading home from work. They say that then medics arrived to transport his body to the Rafidia hospital to be prepared for burial, and en route, Israeli forces stopped the ambulance and at gunpoint then ordered the paramedics to uncover his face so that the soldiers could scan it using facial recognition technology. Finishing off here with the quote, "Even in death, they want to come and to mark their kill." And you can see the aftermath of this here in this picture down here. Now, more on the details. They say Qassas' killing is part of a sweeping Israeli military assault that's being dubbed Operation Iron Wall that has largely emptied 4 refugee camps in the northern West Bank, Jenin, Tulkarem, Farah, and Nor Shams, forcing over 40,000 Palestinians, 40,000, to flee their homes in the largest forced displacement in the territory since the 1967 war. Israeli troops have bulldozed roads and destroyed homes, buildings, water and electricity lines, and other civilian infrastructure. And on February 23rd, Israel's defense minister said that Israeli troops would remain in some of the refugee camps for the coming year and that displaced residents would not be allowed to return. Now, obviously, this is coming at a time where we have Benjamin Netanyahu, where we have guys like Bezel Smootrich, where we have guys like Itamar Ben-Gvir, who are virulently in favor of the total annexation of the West Bank. This is what they view as their sort of biblical right to ownership, right? They view Palestinians as an obstacle to them controlling and settling this entire territory. So again, this has been going on for years, much further before, October 7th and everything, but their plan has always been the total and complete ethnic cleansing of Palestinians from what they call Judea and Samaria. They're referencing the West Bank, and they want to shove the entire Palestinian population out or to kill them, and then to set up their own Israeli settlements. And this is what has been happening and being ramped up over the last couple of years, and just in the last couple of months as well, where you have, like, for example, a recent situation that we had was Bezel Smootrich, the finance minister in Israel, who is extremely pro-expansion of these settlements. He basically cut a deal with Netanyahu, and I talked about this a little bit yesterday in my video, but he basically cut a deal with Netanyahu where, because Netanyahu feels international pressure to not immediately starve the entire Palestinian population in Gaza, they're allowing this tiny little trickle of like a handful of trucks a day to go in, right? And as a part of Bezel Smootrich agreeing to not push back on the crumbs that are being entered into Gaza, he cut a deal with Bibi saying, okay, well, you have to approve of like 22 new settlements in the West Bank. So we're talking about a rapid expansion of the settlement project and settler colonialism inside of the West Bank in these illegal Israeli outposts. And this is just sort of part of the daily violence that Palestinians have been subjected to, again, for years, well before October 7th. And you can see a little bit of that here in this drop site article. 40,000 displaced in just a few months during this one operation. And this is the place that, again, those European diplomats were going to check out the humanitarian situation. And they were fired at by the same IDF that is conducting this slow-rolling ethnic cleansing. Now, in terms of the European backlash to Israel's recent actions, here we have a couple of different things from Euronews to start us off. A majority of the European Union's foreign ministers backed a Dutch proposal to review the bloc's ties with Israel over its actions in Gaza. So the European Union will review its wide-ranging trade and cooperation agreement with Israel over its widened offensive in Gaza and its failure to fully lift a 2-month aid blockade. So the decision came on Tuesday after 17 of the bloc's 27 foreign ministers backed the move tabled earlier this month by the Dutch foreign minister. It means that the EU executive will now launch a review to establish whether Israel has violated its human rights obligations under Article 2 of the EU-Israel Association Agreement, a broad-ranging pact that defines the trade and diplomatic relations between both parties. Now, here's where we get to a little bit of some questions here, right? They say, it is clear from today's discussions that there is a strong majority in favor of a review of Article 2 of our association agreement with Israel. We will launch this review, and in the meantime, it is up to Israel to release more humanitarian aid, which again, they are not doing. Now, further on here, they basically allude to the idea that Israel may be at risk of violating international law, of violating humanitarian law. No, they're not at risk of doing this, right? They have been doing this consistently for over a year and a half of this genocide now, right? Did you guys miss the part where they bombed schools and mosques and churches and refugee camps and hospitals, for that matter, where they deliberately attacked journalists and aid workers and medics, like the recent example that we just saw where they executed 15 Palestinian medics and then tried to bury the evidence to destroy the vehicles and then lied to the international community? Did you miss that? Did you miss when they abducted Palestinians from Gaza and then proceeded to sexually torture them to death? Did you miss that? None of those were concerns in regards to violations of international law or humanitarian law or whatever this trade agreement pact that you have with them in it. It's like we're now like 590 something days into this full-blown genocide Gaza has been essentially wiped from the map, and we're heading into the, I guess, final solution or the final stage of this genocide. And now, this far into it, you're going to have a review to decide whether or not you're going to, I guess, take action in regards to your trade policy with Israel. I mean, to say that this is too little too late is the understatement of a century. Now, granted, at the same time, I don't want to downplay it because it is an important step, and it is at least an indication that there's some extent to which Israel can't cross every single line and, get away with it with complete impunity. But again, it's like it very much too little too late at this point. Now, we also had at the same time the UK, France, and Canada warning of, quote, concrete actions if Israel doesn't halt the war and boost aid. They say they put out a statement calling on Hamas to release hostages, and they threatened sanctions over West Bank settlement expansion. And 22 other countries signed a separate statement urging full resumption of aid. Now, again, steps in the right direction, but you're taking tiny little baby steps when we should have been doing all of this towards the start of this genocide, right? Or even well before that, as Israel was doing the same thing that you're calling them out for doing now, with West Bank settlement expansion and a siege on Gaza. Like, this isn't new. This didn't just start. We're now entering the final stage of all of this. And now you decide to speak out about it. I mean, it's kind of pathetic when you think about it, right? Threatening sanctions over West Bank settlement. We need full-blown sanctions on Israel at this point, right? We need total arms embargo of Israel. We might need a no-fly zone over Gaza. We need to flood humanitarian aid into Gaza, regardless of whether or not Israel is okay with it. Again, we're talking about a rogue state here. We're not talking about, we need to review trade relations, or maybe we'll do some targeted sanctions on some settlement leaders or something like that. There needs to be a total and complete reset of any and all relationships that countries around the world have with Israel in order to bring them into line. That's the only way that this can reasonably be addressed. Now, we also had here, unsurprisingly, in response to this, granted somewhat mild pushback from these European countries and Canada as well, in response to even this pushback, we had, of course, Bezel Smootrich, the guy who was just a couple of days ago coming out and saying that he doesn't think that it's immoral to starve the entire 2 million Palestinian population in Gaza to death. That guy, and who was calling for basically Palestinians to be granted maybe one piece of pita bread per day, he came out, and in response to all of this, he says that this statement that was put out by the UK, France, and Canada criticizing Israel is anti-Semitic. Anti-Semitic. Are we shocked about this? Let's go ahead and listen to this short little clip here.
Bezel Smootrich, the finance minister, has commented this morning, suggesting that those three countries and their leaders are siding with the terrorist organization Hamas, suggesting that it's an anti-Semitic statement.
I mean, it's pathetical. Pathetic and comical at this point, right? It's anti-Semitic to say, hey, maybe you shouldn't starve 1 million babies to death, right? That's anti-Semitism. That's pro-Hamas to say, hey, I think the total, endless death and destruction that you guys have been engaging in for now 19 months straight in front of the entire world is maybe not such a good thing. I think, expelling the entire population in a mass ethnic cleansing campaign from Gaza, probably not a good thing. That makes you an anti-Semite. That makes you a member of Hamas, maybe even, according to these guys. I mean, it's like, they're not even trying. And maybe they don't feel like they even have to try at this point, where you can just call somebody anti-Semitic, call them pro-Hamas, and then that's somehow going to work. I mean, I guess it's arguably worked for them so far, as they haven't really faced any sort of accountability. But I mean, these are the kinds of guys, when it comes to Bezel Smootrich, he belongs in The Hague, right? This guy is an absolute unmitigated genocidal monster. He is a war criminal through and through. A guy who casually speaks about starving 2 million people to death and says, no, I have no moral issue with that. The only issue that I have with that is that maybe the international community wouldn't let us get away with it. Those are his words, right? So, I mean, again, of course, calling it anti-Semitic, what else would you possibly expect from guys like that? Now, again, in terms of the too little too late, we're now 592 days into this genocide. Here we have the the UK Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, who was speaking to the UK Parliament, and he got some pushback on sort of his tepid language here. So here's what he said. He said, "We are now entering a new dark phase. Netanyahu's government is planning to drive Gazans from their homes. Minister Smotrich even spoke of Israeli forces cleansing Gaza. We must call it what it is. And he had some members of the parliament who shouted, call it a genocide. And then he didn't. He called it extremism, dangerous, repellent, and monstrous, but stopped short of calling it what it is. Now, I mean, again, is it extremist? Is it dangerous? Is it repellent? Is it monstrous? Yeah, it's also a genocide. It's also ethnic cleansing. It's not a difficult thing to figure out here. I mean, you use the word when you're talking about one of the top members of the Israeli government and what he said. He's openly saying we want to ethnically cleanse the entire Palestinian population from Gaza. This is their so-called Trump plan that they've been putting forward. That's what it is. That's the definition of ethnic cleansing. And they're openly talking about it. I mean, again, he's planning to drive them from their homes. Guys, the entire Palestinian population in Gaza has already been displaced. Most of them have been displaced multiple different times, as Israel has been playing this sort of genocidal game of musical chairs and telling people to go to the south and then go to Al-Mawasi and then go to this new safe zone. And now you have to evacuate from here. And by the way, we're going to be bombing you the entire time as we're forcing you to these different locations. Like, there is no planning to drive people from their homes. I don't know if you've looked at Gaza, but it's endless piles of rubble at this point. There's barely a building left standing that somebody could even call a home. A huge portion of the population are living in giant refugee camps at this point. I mean, it's like these guys are 18 months behind in their commentary on this. And again, still refusing to call it a genocide, still refusing to take real concrete action at this point. And he was called out for this. We had Stephen Flynn here, a member of parliament and the leader of the SNP in Westminster, who was challenging David Lammy and was calling for a vote to back the ICC, the International Criminal Court, and the International Court of Justice, the ICJ, both of whom have cases against Israel. He also called on them to ban all UK arms sales to Israel and to recognize a Palestinian state. And again, all of this is the bare minimum that you could expect from a rational nation state that actually believes in humanitarian law or international law or just basic humanity, right? This is the bare minimum of what you would be doing. Now, here in the United States, we're in an even worse off state than the United Kingdom because our government, under the Trump administration, imposed sanctions on the International Criminal Court, right? We are trying to ruin the lives of the prosecutors who dared to investigate or to go after Israeli war criminals and to hold them accountable under the standards of international law. We sanctioned them for doing that. We smear the International Court of Justice, calling them anti-Semitic, calling them pro-Hamas for having a genocide case brought against Israel. So, I mean, guys, again, it's like they're catching up a little bit here, and it seems like the dam is maybe starting to break, but it's a little bit too little too late, if you ask me. In terms of a positive here, we did have Spain's Congress of Deputies voting to approve an arms embargo on the state of Israel. So, again, we're seeing some steps that have been taken slowly over the last, 19 months or so. You've had several European countries that have recognized a Palestinian state. Some have called for, cutting off arms sales to Israel. Some have actually taken that step. And so it's a little trickle here, but eventually, slowly but surely, Israel is making itself into an apartheid state or into an international pariah state, if you will, right? And again, they're doing it to themselves, not exactly helping themselves by attacking foreign dignitaries trying to visit where they're at. Now, in terms of the absolutely catastrophic condition that Gaza is in right now, we have this here from Al Jazeera. Thousands of Gaza's children face imminent death under the Israeli siege, according to the UN. And we had a top UN official saying that 93% of children in Gaza are food insecure and about 930,000 are at risk of famine. He predicted that it's possible within the next couple of days that you could have 14,000 Gazan children who are at immediate risk of dying from starvation if nothing is done about it. And again, Israel's promise here in terms of alleviating this humanitarian crisis that they're artificially manufacturing is, we'll allow a couple of aid trucks in per day, right? Just a couple. We'll do a little trickle of aid so that we can give plausible deniability to countries that still want to back us and defend us from, being held accountable for this crime against humanity. Now, checking in on the Israeli media and Israeli society here, we have some polling data and we have some statements on prominent Israeli media outlet, Channel 14, which seems to be one of Benjamin Netanyahu's favorites. Here we have the prominent Judeo-Nazi maniac, Moshe Feiglin, I believe is how you pronounce that, who goes on this genocidal rant saying, quote, "Every child, every baby in Gaza is an enemy. The enemy is not Hamas. We need to conquer Gaza and colonize it and not leave a single Gazan child there. There is no other victory. So, I mean, again, it's one of these clips where it's like, am I shocked that somebody said this in Israeli media? No, because I've been hearing this consistently for the last 19 months straight. It's not shocking. It should be shocking, but it's not surprising that we're seeing this in Israeli media. But it's another one of those instances where it's like, they're saying this out loud, right? Does anybody need any more help figuring out the atrocity, the slaughter that's going on before our eyes? Do we need to say that it's still too complicated for us to really understand? We can't call it a genocide yet. We have prominent people in Israeli media proudly saying we should kill all of the babies in Gaza. Annihilate the babies in Gaza. And this is just, I mean, imagine hearing this kind of shit on CNN or Fox News. That's what this is the equivalent of. Kill all of the babies in Gaza. The enemy is not Hamas. It's apparently the babies. And in terms of Israeli society broadly here, we had some polling data that was asking, does Israel have to let humanitarian aid into Gaza? Here from Israeli channel 13 News, 53%, an outright majority of Israelis said no. Now, granted, you did have 34% who said yes and 13% who seem unsure about the situation. So a majority of Israeli society, according to this poll at least, doesn't believe that they should let in humanitarian aid to Gaza. Now, to be clear, what this position is, in effect, is slaughtering 2 million people. That's what we're talking about. If there is no aid that's allowed into Gaza, and Israel continues on the path that it's on right now, you're talking about the total annihilation of the entire Palestinian population in Gaza. Mass famine, mass starvation, continued bombing, no food, no water, no medical supplies, no fuel. That's what you're talking about. 53% support that notion. So I'll leave you guys off with that. Israel's sort of backing itself into a corner here. Now, what bearing does it have on the actual situation on the ground in Gaza? The fact that we have some pushback from Europe, the fact that we have, Israel continuing to piss off some of its only backers and allies that remain around the world. What impact will that materially have in the immediate future? I don't know. Because Israel, along with the Trump administration, are clearly set in stone on their plan to essentially shove the entire population down to the south towards Rafah, and then to either starve them out, to kill them, or to expel them into surrounding countries in a mass ethnic cleansing campaign. They're not hiding this. They're not making it difficult to figure out what their plan is. That's their openly stated goal. So I'll leave you guys off with that. Clearly, the next few days and weeks are going to be extremely, extremely dark.
Politic guy has the best politics. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me, everyone is saying